The first prince had been to this place many times, but he had never imagined that this compound was hiding an underground room. The moment he stepped in, he sensed that a powerful formation was covering the place, one with faint psychic energy ripples. This was clearly a formation that was meant to repulse psychic energy. This formation existed to protect the man hidden underground. The first prince looked around and saw that he was in a simple stone chamber of white bricks. In the room were a square table and several stools, and a folded blanket in the corner. All of it was extremely simple, but when the first prince set his eyes on the table, he saw a brush rack made of mutton-fat jade, carved in the shape of a coiling dragon and inlaid with gold. These brush racks were so rare that they cost more than an entire city. Not even high nobles and ministers would have been worthy of using such a rack, and the common folk could go several generations and not even be able to dream of owning such a thing. The first prince saw only a few brushes on the rack and was rendered speechless. These brushes had fine and slender tips, and all of them had incredible histories. One of these was even the brush owned by Wei Qing of the Eastern Han Dynasty. Wei Qing was the king of great generals during Emperor Wu's reign, and even now, his achievements were still dazzling to behold. The value of the golden brush that Emperor Wu of Han had gifted him was difficult to fathom. Just who is this person? The first prince internally frowned. He was well experienced, but he still could not determine this man's background. He had wealth that could compare to a small kingdom, but he lived in an extremely crude room and ate plain foods and tea. It was little better than the life of a commoner. But his senior had said that this man could help him resolve all his problems and assist him onto the throne. "Kid, were you the one they chose?" A voice resounded in the first prince's ears, deep and domineering. It felt like two sturdy pieces of metal being banged together. The first prince turned in shock toward the voice and saw a stalwart figure wearing a black robe, his hair black and white. This elder had his back toward the first prince as he read a book by the light of a lamp on the wall. The first prince couldn't see the book from his standpoint, but he could sense an indescribably domineering aura from this man. What an intense, murderous aura. The first prince's eyes went wide. Although this man was trying his utmost to suppress it, the first prince could sense the powerful aura of a general on this man. As the first in line to the throne, the first prince had constantly been influenced by those around him, and possessed an insight that no ordinary person could match. He had seen almost all the renowned great generals of the empire, but even top-class great generals like Geshu Han and Gao Xianji were like infants before this man, like the difference between mud and clouds. The first prince had never sensed such pure and domineering energy on a man before. In certain aspects, not even the renowned great Tang war god who had now been made the crown prince's junior guardian, Wang Zhongxi, could compare. Just who is this person? The first prince raised an eyebrow, curiosity in his heart. He finally believed that this man was in the same group as his mysterious senior. There were some things that could not be created through cultivating martial arts, only by piling up mountains of corpses. But how could there be such a figure in the great Tang Empire that he had never heard of before? Junior Li Ying, the first prince of the imperial house of Li. Is senior willing to assist this prince? Li Ying sternly said. "Haha, first prince? Why should this old man help you? Just because of your title?" The man suddenly laughed, his voice oozing derision. In his eyes, the first prince was apparently not even worth mentioning. Even though Li Ying had already prepared himself to hear such words and was going to humble himself, he still couldn't hide a flash of anger in his eyes. He was the regent of the great Tang, and all of the empire prostrated at his feet. No one had ever dared to take this tone with him, but the first prince swiftly regained his composure. One who wanted to accomplish great things did not fret over minor details. Only by biding his time could he accomplish his grand aspiration. "Senior, be at ease. As long as you are willing to sincerely assist me, when we succeed, you will be a minister of the dragon, and this prince will not treat you badly. Power and prestige. This prince can give you everything," the first prince sternly said. "Haha. Is this your opening offer? That being the case, please go back. It seems like you are not the one this old man is waiting for." The man laughed. Undeterred by the first prince's title, he had asked his guest to leave. Even the first prince was astonished. His senior said that the man who would help him had already been found. Based on past custom, he would only need to promise power, prestige, and wealth to succeed in recruiting him. There were even times when he didn't even need to say anything. Li Ying had never imagined that the other party would reject him after only exchanging a few words. "Senior, please wait. I can make you a king," the first prince hastily added. "Get out." The stone chamber trembled under the man's furious roar. The first prince paled again. He had never imagined this elder to have such a bad temper. Even his revered status as the first prince was of no use here. Even though he was on the verge of being driven out, the first prince calmed down, his mind rapidly turning. This man had a fierce and tyrannical personality, with almost no one earning his respect and no status able to cow him. But the more this was the case, the more the first prince wanted to recruit him. In his experience, if such men weren't fools or good-for-nothings, then they were individuals of prodigious ability, and if so, he had to obtain them for himself. And if this man didn't seek fame, wealth, or power, he had to have some unaccomplished desire. With this thought, the first prince knew what he had to say. "As long as Senior helps me succeed, I will mobilize the strength of the entire country to fulfill one of your desires. No matter what it is, as long as it is within this prince's power, this prince will agree." Li Ying suddenly called out. Everything went silent. "Okay, you were the one who said it," the man replied in his booming voice. "A sovereign does not make jokes." The first prince was elated, knowing that he had guessed correctly. These words were just right for that man. "Kid, remember your words from today. When you succeed, I will have you carry out your promise," the man sternly said. "I still have one more problem left. If you can't satisfy it, I would still rather spend my old age in this place than help you." Li Ying's heart tensed as he hastily replied, "Senior, please speak. If that day really comes and I have you do the deed yourself, can you really do it?" the man coldly asked. Li Ying was startled, immediately understanding what the man was saying. But he quickly regained his composure. "Senior, be at ease. The dragon is the lord of all beings, a divine creature. Only the strongest can ascend to the throne of the 9 and 5. The kind do not command soldiers and the righteous do not grasp for profit. If I did not have this resolve, I would have never come to find you," the first prince sternly replied without hesitation. "Ha! Good. You are now worthy to receive my help." The man put down his book and finally turned around. The first prince tensed as he focused on that figure in the flickering light. This man had tyrannical eyes and a domineering aura. The white whiskers hanging from his lip were hard and straight like needles. His most striking features were the deep scar across his right eyebrow and his deep and piercing eyes. Li Ying had never seen such eyes before. Eyes that seemed to see through the world, bursting with intelligence and wit. It seemed like countless schemes were passing through them at every moment. And the thick general's aura he exuded made it seem like he had studied millions of texts and knew every possible strategy. "This man is not simple," Li Ying inwardly celebrated. "Might I ask for Senior's honored name?" "Heh, kid, you don't even know this old man?" The black-robed elder coldly smiled. Li Ying was astonished. The elder was implying that Li Ying should have recognized him. But how could that be? "Senior, have we met before?" Despite his confusion, the first prince remained polite and calm. The old man appeared 70-some years old, but none of Li Ying's advisors were older than 40. He was confident that he had never seen this old man before. But the stronger a person was, the more eccentric their personality. So Li Ying decided to remain polite. "Kid, come up and take a closer look." The elder smirked at Li Ying. Li Ying was even more confused, but he knew that the elder had a reason to say this. He took a few steps forward and began to closely inspect the man. On first glance, Li Ying had found the elder to be a complete stranger. But as he examined the man's features and the scar above his right eye, the face overlapped with a face in his memories. Boom! The first prince trembled like he had been struck by lightning, and he staggered backward with his eyes wide open in fright. "No! That's impossible. How? Li Ying was in utter disbelief. He knew that his senior was introducing him to an extremely capable person, but Li Ying had never imagined that this man would be him. Impossible. Impossible. Weren't you dead? The first prince's heart was raging. He suddenly understood why the elder had asked those questions. Kid, you still have time for second thoughts. The elder slowly stood up from the ground. As he rose, the earth quaked and a vast sea of energy erupted from his body. The elder looked at Li Ying in derision. At that moment, the first prince's eyes were uncertain, and it seemed like he truly was feeling a hint of regret. But a few moments later he had calmed back down, his eyes growing even more resolved than before. This prince will never back down. Tap, tap. In the main hall of the King of Foreign Lands residence, Wang Chong's index finger and middle finger were rhythmically tapping. His head was slightly raised as he looked at the ceiling, countless thoughts running through his mind. Wang Chong had already taken little Li into his residence and was having experts guard him around the clock. Even so, Wang Chong had still not made much progress. Eunuch Gao had been injured, and everything was shrouded in a cloud of mystery that prevented Wang Chong from seeing anything. This was the heart of the empire. What in the world had happened? Wang Chong lowered his head once more toward the cloud-patterned scarf. Wang Chong had already seen this bloodstain once, but he still found it alarming to behold. Eunuch Gao would never leave the sage emperor unless he was dead. Just how did the first prince manage to do it? And if Eunuch Gao isn't at Taiha Palace, who is the one taking care of the sage emperor? Wang Chong muttered to himself, clouds of worry on his brow. No one understood more than him what the collapse of the sage emperor meant for the empire. Although the sage emperor had failed to appear many times, as long as he sat in Taiha Palace, this world still had one final barrier. My lord! There was a rush of footsteps from outside, and a few moments later, Su Kai walked in, respectfully offering up a letter with both hands. Little Li has already marked out all the areas Eunuch Gao normally goes to. As Su Kai spoke, he placed the letter on the desk. Wang Chong took the letter and looked it over. On it was written all the places Eunuch Gao had been to. Wang Chong gave a slight nod. Make a few copies of this and give them to Yang Zhao, Li Jingzhong, Bian Lingcheng, and Zhao Fengchen in the palace. Have the four of them do their utmost to keep an eye on these places and search the palace. If Eunuch Gao isn't being restrained and still has freedom, then he will go to these places. But if not? A cloud of worry passed across Wang Chong's face, but he didn't continue. The information Little Li could provide was extremely limited, and he knew nothing about where Eunuch Gao could be. But from Little Li's recount, Wang Chong had noticed a certain detail. Little Li had passed a message to Eunuch Gao in the suites, and Eunuch Gao had given him back a reply. That he could reply to Little Li meant that he had a brush, ink, and paper with him, which were not things a prisoner would be provided with. But if Eunuch Gao was alive and able to move freely, he would go to protect the sage emperor. This was the contradiction Wang Chong was facing. No matter what, he had to clear this matter up. In addition, Wang Chong once more looked at the scarf, his eyes narrowing. Eunuch Gao's cultivation is something that not even Tongluo Great General Abusi or Anshi Protector General Gao Shenji can compare to. Anyone who could injure him must possess formidable strength. Battles of such experts should have created a large ruckus, and there's no way that no one in the palace would have heard it. Tell them to investigate this matter. I must know if anything strange happened in the palace over the last few months. Have them report to me on the slightest turmoil. There was a wise and perceptive light in Wang Chong's eyes. Even though the information Little Li had provided was limited, Wang Chong had been able to extract many details. Little Li would have certainly been dumbfounded if he had been listening, because he would have never even thought about the possibilities Wang Chong had proposed. Yes, Su Kai solemnly bowed and left. Whoosh! A few moments later, carrier pigeons took flight from the King of Foreign Lands residence. Yang Zhao, Li Jingzhong, Bian Lingcheng, and Zhao Fengchen had the powers of Consort Taizhen, the fifth prince, and the imperial army on their side. If such an incident had taken place, these four were capable of finding it. Time slowly passed. The inner palace seemed calm on the surface, but an undercurrent surged beneath. The four of them searched all the places Little Li had mentioned, but the results took Wang Chong completely by surprise. It wasn't that they hadn't found any trace of eunuch Gao. Wang Chong had already prepared himself for that. Instead, it was that Yang Zhao, Li Jingzhong, Bian Lingcheng, and Zhao Fengchen had discovered that those places had been swept clean. All the furniture moved out and the room rendered spotless. It was like no one had ever inhabited those places before. Judging by what the four had learned, this had probably taken place only a few days ago. The four of them reacted very quickly and found the maids and eunuchs who had performed the cleaning. But these servants knew nothing, all of them saying that they had simply been following orders. The four followed the chain of command to find the eunuch who had given the initial order, but they discovered that the eunuch had disappeared. Moreover, the palace's eunuch register did not contain this man's name. It was like such a man had never existed in the palace. After receiving these reports, Wang Chong fell into a long silence. All the clues had been cut off right in the middle. There was undoubtedly some force in the palace who had noticed his movements and wiped away all evidence. Wang Chong deeply furrowed his brow. "Your Highness, it must be the first prince's work. I truly can't think of anyone else besides him who would have a reason to do such a thing." Su Kai, Chang Sanyuan, Zhang Ke, and Su Shixian were all present, all of them indignant. Wang Chong said nothing. First he shook his head, and then he nodded. Seeing Wang Chong's reaction, Su Shixian cautiously asked, "Your Highness, is there something wrong? Did we say anything incorrect?" "It wasn't that you said anything wrong, but I feel like there's something strange about this incident." Wang Chong's brows were locked together as he sternly spoke. "The first prince's men appeared during our last operation, pursuing Little Li. They would think of ways to clear up the evidence, so I don't find that strange. But there's something different about this time." Wang Chong fell quiet. While he was thinking, no one dared to carelessly disturb him. At this time, countless ideas were appearing in Wang Chong's mind. This was not Wang Chong's first clash with the first prince. In past incidents, while the first prince had many advisors assisting him with his plans who were able to cleanly pull off the Jade Consort Shao incident without leaving any clues, they were not so sharp to this level. He had only just given the order, but the first prince had already swept away all the clues as if his actions had been predicted. This had never happened in his previous clashes with the first prince. As the saying went, the difference of a hair could result in an error of 1,000 li. While others might not have noticed anything from this incident, Wang Chong had noticed a subtle transformation with the first prince. "I hope I'm overthinking things." A thought flashed in Wang Chong's mind, but he quickly rejected the idea. "Reporting." At this moment, a golden guard rushed inside. "Your Highness, there's news from the Imperial Clan Court. The assassin Azura that Lord Zhao Fengchen captured in the palace was rescued." "What?" Everyone turned in surprise, and Wang Chong's brow furrowed even deeper as he stood up from his desk. "When did these things happen?" Wang Chong solemnly said. Wang Chong knew that Azura had a firm will and was resistant to torture, so getting any information out of him, particularly when it came to the first prince, was nigh impossible. Thus, he had not paid him much attention. But the Imperial Clan Court was no ordinary place, and the inner palace was packed with experts and swarming with Imperial Army soldiers. The Imperial Clan Court itself was heavily guarded, so a rescue was normally impossible. The Golden Guard kneeled and sternly said, "It was just a few hours ago. The invader was extremely powerful and killed quite a few members of the Imperial Clan Court, and more troops are surging in. In addition, the Imperial Army has also gone over and the entire palace has been locked down." There was a stillness in the hall as everyone glanced at each other. Su Kai took a few steps forward and asked, "Your Highness, could it be?" "Impossible," Wang Chong immediately said. Azura had been escorted to the Imperial Clan Court under the watch of the consorts, concubines, and their servants. Even if the assistant minister of the Imperial Clan Court was privately working with the first prince, he would never intervene in this matter. Besides that, many soldiers of the Imperial Clan Court had been killed. Perhaps such a stir would have been warranted for someone else, but not for Azura. Keep a close eye on this situation and report to me on any new developments. Wang Chong frowned as he spoke. That idea from before once more emerged in his mind, and he felt even more intensely that something wasn't right. Yes. Senior, you're brilliant. You really managed to predict the king of foreign lands' moves. In the Eastern Palace, an entirely different scene was playing out. Zhu Tong'en and the other advisors were all looking reverentially at the stalwart elder. On his throne, the first prince gave a slight nod. He was finally convinced that this man would be of enormous assistance to him. Upon arriving at the Eastern Palace, the elder had asked for a detailed account from the first prince of everything that had happened. He had also looked through all the information regarding the first prince's greatest foe, the king of foreign lands. When he mentioned that Wang Chong was about to send his men into the palace to search for clues, and that men should be sent to wipe away any evidence within half a day, the other advisors had thought that he was jumping at shadows. But right after the Eastern Palace's men had finished the cleaning, people appeared in those areas to search them. The smallest delay might have resulted in an entirely different situation. At this point, all the advisors sincerely trusted in this man. This was the first time in their battle with Wang Chong that they had the initiative. Humph. I was just wiping your butt. There's nothing worth celebrating here. The elder showed no courtesy or grace. All the voices died away, everyone's faces turning red with embarrassment. While some admired, others were discontent, and a soft grumble could immediately be heard in the hall. Humph. What's so great about him? Just a blind cat catching a dead mouse, purely coincidence. It's not like he did anything great. Bang! The elder suddenly raised his head, his tiger eyes flashing with sharp and cold light. Before anyone could react, there was a massive boom. That grumbling Eastern Palace advisor was immediately slammed into the wall with such force that the wall cracked in an explosion of blood and debris. The Eastern Palace advisor's chest had completely caved in, almost all his bones shattered. One could see that he would be dead soon. Ah! Cries of alarm resounded through the hall. The advisors were all frightened by this display, their faces paling as they backed away. This was the Eastern Palace of the Crown Prince. None of them had imagined that there would be someone so bold as to attack another right in front of the first prince. Li Ying's eyes twitched once or twice, a grimace on his face. It was clear that he had not expected this reaction from the elder. Come, carry him out. The first prince placed his hands on his desk and slowly rose to his feet. In addition, all of you listen up. In the future, no one in the Eastern Palace is allowed to disrespect Senior. I will now grant him my token. In the Eastern Palace, Senior's order is my order. You should treat Senior with as much courtesy as you normally treat me. Right, Senior? Everyone still doesn't know your name. What should we call Senior? Humph! The elder sneered as he scanned the room. His eyes were as bright as lightning, and all the advisors in the room could only lower their heads and avoid his gaze. You juniors don't have the right to know this old man's name. But as we will be colleagues in the future, and I will need your help, you may call me Ghost King. This old man shouldn't have existed in this world. But even if this old man is a ghost, he is still the lord of all ghosts. The old man spoke in a domineering tone. Haha, good. With Senior Ghost King, this prince can accomplish anything. All of you, pay respects to the Ghost King. The first prince had clearly found the name Ghost King to be strange, but he quickly reacted and heartily laughed. Led by the first prince, the others also began to express their respect. Paying respects to Senior. In a flash, all of them lowered their heads and acknowledged that the elder occupied the same status as the first prince. Senior, Wang Chong definitely won't be stopping here. If he continues the investigation, there might be even more problems. In addition, Azura was just rescued, and investigations might begin soon. What should we do next? The first prince asked. While he was trying to maintain his calm when talking about Wang Chong, his reaction betrayed him. The first prince felt great dread when it came to Wang Chong. In truth, if not for him, the fifth prince would never have been able to threaten him or have warranted such action. Hearing the first prince's words, the Ghost King's expression relaxed. This old man said before that if you gave me all authority, this old man would naturally help you take care of everything. As for that king of foreign lands, there is no need for your highness to worry. He's merely an immature brat. Your highness lost to him before merely because you did not find the right method to give him the crucial blow. If your highness kills this person, then your situation will be much better for the next few months. At the very least, there won't be a need to be so passive, the Ghost King said. These words had the attention of everyone in the hall, and even the first prince was rather curious. The right method? What does senior mean? The Ghost King simply handed over a prepared slip of paper. In a restaurant in the western part of the city, Old Eagle was wearing a veiled bamboo hat, disguised as a traveling martial artist. His hands clutched the railing of the balcony, his eyes twitching. He had already heard everything about the Azura incident. In truth, he was the one who had sent the reports to Wang Chong. Something is wrong. Old Eagle's eyes twitched. He had followed Wang Chong for a long time and had never seen him fail before, whether it was on the court or on the battlefield. But recently, Old Eagle had begun to sense something strange. I hope that it's just my misperception, Old Eagle quietly said to himself as he slowly scanned the crowd below. Unlike others, while Old Eagle had an established residence, he never stayed in one place for long. As he spent more and more time at Wang Chong's side, he had come to understand more and more that the intelligence officer could not stay in one place. Even the most secretive of residences would leave behind traces of evidence that would allow it to be noticed. Even a rabbit had 3 burrows, so why not humans? Still no news. Old Eagle turned to a member of his spy team. Wang Chong had picked out the name for this organization, and only elites were allowed to join it. "My lord, I also find it very strange. The members of the spy team have always been prompt, and little Chui was one of the best in the batch of new recruits. Given how the last few operations have gone, he shouldn't have made a mistake. His Highness is still waiting for news from the Imperial Clan Court, and all he's doing is delivering the report. That report should have arrived a long time ago, but he's late by 5 minutes, he middle-aged man sternly said, his brow furrowed in concern. This delay was rather abnormal, but it was still acceptable according to the rules of the spy team. After a few moments of thought, Old Eagle made his decision. Something isn't right. Immediately send a carrier pigeon. If we don't receive any news then, I'll go myself. In addition, inspect our surroundings. I can't shake off this strange feeling. Get ready and settle the bill. We're leaving now. The spy team member grunted and immediately turned around. Soup dumplings. 2 strings of cash for a bowl. Fresh pork. Your money back if it's not fresh. Iced tonghulu. Sweet and sour. Come and take a look. Old Eagle looked down at the street and saw that the capital was just as bustling as ever. No, I must go and see His Highness. With this thought, Old Eagle prepared to leave. Whoosh! Suddenly, he heard the flapping of wings. Old Eagle looked up and saw a white carrier pigeon flying toward him. On its left leg was an azure hoop. It's little Chui's carrier pigeon. Old Eagle immediately recognized it. In the end, little Chui's pigeon had managed to come within the time limit. Old Eagle's spy team had a rule that once the time had passed, it would mean that a mishap had occurred and everyone needed to leave. Old Eagle's heart relaxed as he extended his right hand to receive the bird. He proficiently removed the letter and looked down. As Old Eagle focused, not good. His pupils instantly constricted and his eyes flew open. Everyone, hear my order. Immediately, before the word withdraw could leave his mouth, a large ruckus came from the door of the restaurant. Old Eagle looked down and saw that a white-robed scholar, perhaps dejected from some event in life, had become intoxicated and charged inside. As he charged in, he knocked aside a waiter and then spat a mouthful of alcohol and saliva at the person trying to block his path. Young Master Zhao, you can't come in. You're already this drunk. You're going to disturb the other patrons. Please, leave immediately. What are you standing around for? Hurry and stop him. Chaos ensued in the entrance to the restaurant. But this sight only made Old Eagle more uneasy. Swoosh! Old Eagle immediately jumped on the railing and flew off. Tang Barbarian, Hand over your life. Suddenly, the exquisitely crafted screen on the balcony exploded in blade energy. 5 or 6 Tibetans had been behind the screen, and all of them were now lunging toward Old Eagle at incredible speed. Clang, clang, clang. Halos radiated from the feet of the Tibetans, and dark energy seethed behind them. Massive Buddhas with 6, 8, or 10 arms and 3, 6, or 8 heads suddenly appeared, various weapons in their hands as they attacked Old Eagle in unison. It was obvious that they were all top-class experts. Old Eagle instantly paled. At the King of Foreign Lands' residence, Wang Chong frowned as he looked away from the map of the imperial palace, his eyelids twitching. For some reason, recently, whenever his eyelids twitched, he had an ill foreboding that some foul event had taken place. Reporting. Just then, in a rush of air, a golden guard came inside. Your Highness, it's bad. There's been an incident. We've just learned that Old Eagle was ambushed at Western Crane Pavilion. He was badly injured and is currently unconscious. His chances of survival are dire. The golden guard spoke with a trembling tone, and his face was grave. Bang! Wang Chong trembled, and he felt like he had been struck by a lightning bolt. What? Old Eagle was extremely unique. He was one of Wang Chong's earliest followers and also the most loyal. And unlike others, Old Eagle resided in the rear, and Wang Chong would normally never bring Old Eagle to the front with him. This made him safer than most, and Wang Chong had never been too worried about him. But Wang Chong had never imagined that Old Eagle would be ambushed, and this fact left him both stunned and enraged. Where is he now? Have you investigated the perpetrators? Wang Chong asked, staring at the golden guard. We still don't have the details of the situation. Lord Su is currently escorting Old Eagle back to the residence, the golden guard reported. A few moments later, Old Eagle was carried in on a stretcher. Wang Chong's subordinates Su Shixian, Chang Sanyuan, and Chun Bin had heard the news, and they rushed over with looks of sorrow and fury on their faces. Old Eagle's eyes were tightly shut, and his face was as white as a sheet of paper. His chest was stained with blood, and it was apparent that numerous bones had been broken. Many of the crucial joints on his body showed heavy injury, and weapons shaped like golden hairpins had been thrust into several acupuncture points. It was obvious that the attackers had shown no mercy and had made every attempt to take Old Eagle's life. Lord Chen's injuries are extremely serious. 29 places have been badly wounded, and in truth, the fact that he's still alive is a miracle. I've already had him swallow pills and applied salve to his wounds, but the crucial part is that those assassination weapons were dipped in poison. This poison has already spread through his body. It will depend on Lord Chun to see if he can survive. A white-haired doctor put away a blackening silver needle that he had just removed from Old Eagle's body and sighed. He began to put away his medicine box as he prepared to leave. Once the doctor from King Song's residence departed, an oppressive air descended. What's going on here? How could Old Eagle have been injured? An ashen Wang Chong turned to the spy team member kneeling next to Old Eagle. Your Highness, we also don't know what's going on. Those Tibetans seem to have already scouted out the area. They pretended to be patrons and entered the restaurant before we did. The moment the Lord let his guard down, they charged in and shouted, "Avenge Great Minister Daluan," while madly attacking him. The spy team member said. Buzz. The mention of Great Minister Daluan made everyone grimace. The only person this could indicate was the Ngari Great Minister of Yusang, who had died at the Battle of Talas, Daluan Ruozan. The spy team member continued. Those men were incredibly savage and fearless. Even though we tried our best, we were still no match for them, and even when the city guard and imperial army arrived, they still didn't run. In the end, our Lord had to activate a switch that had been set up beforehand and escape into an underground tunnel to finally throw them off. The spy team members' eyes were streaked with blood. The spy team members all placed Old Eagle on an extremely high pedestal, and almost all of them had received personal guidance from him. In this sense, Old Eagle was both their superior and their teacher. The assassination attempt had provoked the entire spy team. In truth, it was the spy team members who had brought Old Eagle over on the stretcher, and many of them had died escorting him. Wang Chong said nothing, but everyone could sense the rage building up within him. Ever since Wang Chong had become the most renowned war god on the continent, no one had ever dared to challenge him like this. Even the enraged Ishbara Kagan chose to back away when confronted by Wang Chong's terse threat, let alone others. This was the first time anyone had attacked one of Wang Chong's subordinates like this, and in broad daylight, right at the feet of the Son of Heaven. Everyone knew that Old Eagle's heavy injuries had already provoked Wang Chong's ire, and those people would have to pay a heavy cost. Your Highness, could it be people from the Ngari royal lineage? Su Kai proposed. In the Battle of Talas, Yusang had lost 2 great generals. While Daluan Ruozan and Huashu Huaitsong were already dead, the commander of the Mutri Great Cavalry, Huaba Senji, had survived. Moreover, Daluan Ruozan had been highly regarded throughout Yusang, and ever since his death, an undercurrent had been flowing under the surface of the plateau. Those people loyal to Daluan Ruozan and Huashu Huaitsong had been constantly talking about avenging Daluan Ruozan. If we can't kill the enemy on the battlefield, we'll kill him off the battlefield. Such cries could be heard loud and clear within Yusang. They had already been thwarted several times. If these men were coming for Daluan Ruozan's sake, then they had ample reason. Impossible! Wang Chong shook his head and firmly rejected the idea. This matter can't be that simple. Daluan Ruozan died at our hands, so if they had really intended to avenge Daluan Ruozan, they should have come for us. What does it have to do with Old Eagle? And besides, Old Eagle never even took part in the Battle of the Talas, nor was he responsible for intelligence gathering during the battle. I was the one who set down the rules of the spy team. Old Eagle has 57 active locations spread across the capital that he moves between each month. A few Tibetans who had infiltrated the capital wouldn't know the area, so how could they so precisely pin down Old Eagle's movements? Moreover, Old Eagle was in disguise and has never revealed his face to outsiders. These words left the others stunned, and the hall fell quiet. They had all believed that this was simply a Tibetan attempt at revenge, as the attackers truly had been Tibetans. It was so clearly laid out that none of them had doubted it. But Wang Chong's words had left their eyes wide open, and they had finally noticed how suspicious the incident was. Yes, if the Tibetans had wanted revenge, they had large and obvious targets like the King of Foreign Lands residence or Wang family residence. There would be no need to go through more trouble. They could have just attacked the King of Foreign Lands residence. More importantly, Old Eagle was constantly moving between bases, and not even his friends knew his exact location. This matter was not as simple as it seemed. Your Highness, what do you mean? Now that they had all noticed how suspicious the incident was, they turned gravely toward Wang Chong. Wang Chong said nothing, only gazed at Old Eagle with sorrow and rage. No one could ambush his subordinates like this without paying a price. No matter who his opponent was, he would make them regret it. Wang Chong clenched his fists and coldly ordered, "Pass on my order. Mobilize all our men. Have the city guard and public order squads move out. Even if we have to turn over the entire capital, those Tibetans must be captured." Yes, all of them replied in unison, and a few moments later, the entire capital began to move. Countless soldiers began to scour the city for those Tibetans, and none of them was more enraged than Zhang Quebec Xianxia was Old Eagle's disciple, and Old Eagle had been both teacher and father to him. Upon learning that Old Eagle was heavily injured and in a coma, his survival uncertain, Xianxia had immediately moved to take control of the almost paralyzed intelligence network. Repressing his rage, he had cast a vast net over the entire capital. Only one day later, Xianxia had tracked them down. They had been found in a caravan that was moving south. These Tibetan experts had swiftly noticed the danger that they were in and were trying to flee the capital. But they had not chosen to use the gate traditionally frequented by the merchants of the western regions, the Western Gate, instead choosing a caravan that was moving south. Once they were a safe distance from the capital, they would leave the caravan and circle back to Yusang. Wang Chong's experts quickly moved out, working with the city guard, public order squad, and Tensum master archers who had participated in the border incident to form an interception squad. After a short but intense battle, half of the 8 Tibetan experts were killed, and of the remaining 4, 2 chose to commit suicide. The last 2 were captured, one of them heavily injured, and escorted to the prison beneath the King of Foreign Lands' residence. Clap. In the dim and sinister prison, a whip lashed the body of one of the Tibetan assassins. The immense power and sting of the whip immediately tore through the furs the Tibetan was wearing and left a long and bloody wound on his body. Talk! Who put you up to this? Xianxia stared at the tied-up Tibetan assassin, his eyes streaked with blood and burning with rage. Kakik! Keep hitting. Even if you beat me to death, I won't talk. This is revenge for our great minister. Have you finally tasted a little pain now? The assassin's hair was disheveled and his body was covered in wounds, but his eyes remained cold and sharp, like those of a wolf. The lashes of the whip only made him more ferocious and defiant, as if the whip was striking someone else. Humph! What revenge? You were just a lackey for someone else. Without someone working with you, how would you know where master would appear? And don't you know? My master never took part in the Battle of Talas. He has nothing to do with Daluan Ruozen's death. Even if you kill him, you've avenged nothing. Just a bunch of pitiful ants being used by another. Xianxia coldly said. Buzz. The Tibetan assassin's face instantly froze. Humph. No matter what you say, I'm willing to do anything as long as I can strike a blow against you, the Tibetan assassin said, but his expression and tone were clearly not as harsh. Humph, still being stubborn. Come, attend upon him well. Remember, don't let him die. Xianxia coldly snorted. Passing the whip to a spy team member, he turned around and left. At that moment, there was a deep sense of grief in his eyes. Ah! Screams began to rise from the cell. No mercy was shown to one's enemies. In the main hall of the King of Foreign Lands' residence, Wang Chong, Su Kai, Su Shixian, and Chen Bin were waiting for Jean Quebec, Your Highness. You were right. Someone really was helping them. Those Tibetans were being used. Xianxia bowed, his eyes dim. Although the captured Tibetan assassin hadn't directly said it, his reaction had revealed everything. They had clearly believed that they had been avenging Daluan Ruozen in this operation. I understand. Thank you for your service. I understand what's going on, Wang Chong indifferently said. As he raised his head, countless thoughts rushed through his mind. Although he hadn't gotten the name of the true culprit from the Tibetan assassin, there was no need for Wang Chong to ask such questions. The number of people in the capital who had the means and the motive for such an operation could be counted with one's fingers. The first prince. You again? A cold light gleamed in Wang Chong's eyes. There were 3 people with the motive for this in the capital: King Qi, Li Junxian, and the first prince. But King Qi had only known about Wang Chong, and all his operations had always been targeted at him. As for Old Eagle, King Qi was too proud to even consider him. As for Li Junxian, although the 2 of them got along like fire and water, the Confucian sect was also too proud to lower themselves to such a level. This meant that there was only one person left with the proper motive. And if one considered what had happened in the Imperial Palace recently, the answer was obvious. But Wang Chong had never imagined that he would collude with Yusang. No matter who the true culprit is, Yusang is undoubtedly connected, and the only one who could order these people to mobilize has to be a member of Yusang's upper echelons. Xianxia, write a letter for me recounting this entire incident to Yusang Imperial Minister Dalen Trinling. Tell him that this king is awaiting his reply. Wang Chong's face was a sheet of ice as he spoke. Dalen Trinling. Wang Chong had long known of this name. When it came to reputation, status, and ability, this man was far above the deceased Daluan Ruozen. Daluan Ruozen was only the great minister of the Ngari royal lineage, but Dalen Trinling was the true helmsman of that empire. This man had made his reputation almost entirely on several major victories in his early years against the Great Tang. Even when Crown Prince's junior guardian Wang Zhongxi was at his zenith, he was still apprehensive of the imperial minister within Yusang's royal capital. In the militarist Confucian conflict, the surrounding countries and Confucian sect had conspired together, and all their negotiations and peace talks had gone abnormally smoothly. Wang Chong had long ago sensed that there was someone pushing these events from behind the scenes. There had to be someone in the foreign countries who was helping the Confucians rise and control the situation. And even though he had no evidence, Wang Chong was sure that this person was the Yusang imperial minister, Dalen Trinling. If someone claimed that this man knew nothing about this assassination and had played no role, Wang Chong would never believe it. Whoosh! Several days later, a letter bearing Wang Chong's wrath flew across the mountains, over the plateau, and into the royal palace of Yusang. Imperial Minister, a letter from the Great Tang. The royal capital guard looked at the seal on the paper and froze. It's from the king of foreign lands. In the Yusang Empire, Wang Chong's name was a taboo, and few even dared to refer to his title. Moreover, the Yusang Empire did not communicate with the king of foreign lands, and their relationship was one of enemies. This was the first time it had ever received a formal letter from the king of foreign lands. Oh! Dalen Trinling, who was studying a map of Yusang, the Great Tang, and the surrounding countries, raised his head. Hand it over and let me see. Upon receiving the letter and reading through it, Dalen Trinling couldn't help but frown. Dalen Trinling had made his name much earlier than Wang Chong, even earlier than Wang Zhongxi. He was one of the most illustrious ministers on the continent. Wang Chong had become young marquis at the age of 17 and king of foreign lands at the age of 18, and was the new war god of his generation. There was no question that Dalen Trinling had been the Wang Chong for Yusang several decades ago, and he had become famous at no less an age than Wang Chong's. And his fame at the time was also no less than Wang Chong's. This was precisely why Dalen Trinling had always regarded Wang Chong rather highly. Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will never be defeated. This was a quotation from one of the military texts of the Central Plains. Until he was completely confident, until he thoroughly understood who Wang Chong was, Dalen Trinling would never recklessly attack him. Interesting. I'd like to see what he can do. Dalen Trinling gently smiled as he threw the letter to the side. That youth in the capital was still too simple-minded. He was merely the new war god of the Great Tang. Not even the invincible war god, now Crown Prince's junior guardian, Wang Zhongxi could make him feel fear, let alone Wang Chong. So why would he be afraid of a mere letter? The Tibetan plateau was not the Turkic steppe, and he was not Ishbara Kagan. Wang Chong's threatening letter held no meaning to him. Don't worry about it. Continue with your tasks. After saying this, Dalen Trinling turned his attention back to the map. Not long after the flapping of wings signaled the arrival of a bird, a golden guard came in and reported on the letter's contents. Your Highness, Yusang has sent back a reply. Dalen Trinling says that they know nothing about the incident in the capital and that although those people truly are Tibetans, just like the Great Tang, Yusang is not able to control all its people. He asks for your Highness to not develop a misunderstanding of Yusang because of those people. Is that so? Wang Chong coldly laughed. There's no evidence, so Yusang is uninvolved? Dalen Trinling, this is your reply. It seems that you don't understand that this isn't a negotiation, and I certainly don't need you to admit to it. I only need a price. You simply have no idea who you're dealing with, Wang Chong coldly said. There was no questioning Dalen Trinling's prestige in Yusang, and he was probably the most troublesome minister still living in this world. But Wang Chong was himself the greatest war saint in the history of the world. Wang Chong knew who he was facing, but Dalen Trinling had no idea who his opponent really was. Inform the triangular pass. Have Li Sai and Su Hanshan get ready. After so much training, it's about time they put some work in. In addition, write a letter for me to Big Dipper City's great General Geshu Han. Request him to do something for me. Wang Chong indifferently said, his eyes frighteningly cold. Rumble. In the distant northeastern corner of Yusang, at the triangular gap, hooves thundered and dust billowed. Mounted upon a Fergana steed, Li Sai folded up Wang Chong's letter and put it in his bosom. He turned around, sweeping his sharp eyes across the vast plain. Countless soldiers were sweeping across the plain with a thunderous momentum. Everyone, hear my order. Move out immediately. Target. Yusang. Li Sai took out his massive broadsword and aimed it straight at the air. his booming voice brimming with energy and resounding across the skies of Yusang. "Ruor!" The surrounding soldiers thunderously replied, and an immense killing intent and will to fight soared into the air, so dense that space itself twisted and blurred. Gallop! In a stampede of hooves, a steel flood formed from thousands of cavalry thundered into the heartland of Yusang. Right behind the cavalry, Tang ballistae clanked and groaned as they moved along on a newly designed carriage. After Talas, Su Hanshan had gathered many craftsmen who had remodeled the firing platforms to be more suited for the ballistae, allowing them to move and fire faster while also expanding their firing angles. The soldiers at the triangular gap were far from the only ones being mobilized. Longxi, the border Big Dipper city. He send soldiers to the Yusang Empire, but they can't show that they're soldiers of the Big Dipper army. Would Yusang not be able to recognize the traits of the Big Dipper army? It seems like that man in the capital has begun to fight with Dalen Trinling. Geshu Han put down Wang Chong's letter and gave an amused smile. Even Geshu Han somewhat feared that head minister who resided throughout the year in the royal capital of the Yusang Empire. After all, this was a man who not even his former superior and current crown prince's junior guardian had been able to defeat. The thunder peal in the silence, the danger lurking in the placid, was the style of that minister of the plateau. And one also had to consider that the atmospheric pressure of the plateau was not suitable for those who lived on low altitudes. Atmospheric pressure was the term used by that man in the capital. Geshu Han had imagined that these two would eventually conflict, but he hadn't imagined that it would be so quickly. A hesitant voice spoke up. "My lord, the imperial court is keeping a close eye on us, and the Confucian sect won't be happy if we mobilize at this time. If the imperial court finds out, the current Big Dipper army was not the Big Dipper army of the past. Not only had their numbers been reduced, there were now many supervisors that made any movement difficult. We naturally need to respect the laws of the imperial court. Who said that the army being mobilized would be our Big Dipper army?" Geshu Han lightly said. "My lord, you mean?" The subordinate seemed to realize something. "Pass on my order. After 2 days, dispatch 5,000 elites for routine training," Geshu Han ordered. His smile slowly faded. No matter what plan Wang Chong had, he would always give his full support. A false peace was something he had never wanted. Moreover, by deploying soldiers to Yusang, Wang Chong was actually helping him. The central region of Yusang was more than 3,000 kilometers from the triangular gap. The grass here was lush, and hundreds of thousands of sheep covered the plain like a mantle of snow. Yaks were mixed in with them, and outside of the yak and sheep herds were herds of wild horses. These were the highland steeds of the Tibetan plateau. All of them were muscular and stalwart, and galloped across the plain like dark clouds. After the War of the Southwest, the battles against the Big Dipper army, and the Battle of Talas, Yusang had suffered grievous losses. And in that plague that had swept over the plateau, many of these muscular highland steeds who were resistant to the climate of the plateau had died. Ever since then, Yusang had decided to enter a resting phase, particularly so that they could raise war horses. Not only that, Yusang had also bought soybeans from the central plains to supplement the wild grasses of the plain. Breeding a large number of highland steeds was the #1 priority for Yusang. As long as it had enough wild horses, Yusang could regain its breath and recover from the wounds inflicted by war. As for the lost manpower, every shepherd of the plain was a potential Tibetan horseman. As long as they were trained, Yusang could have a massive force of basic cavalry in just 3 to 5 years. In 5 or 10 years, they would be completely mature, and in 10 to 15 years, all the traces of war would have been wiped away and Yusang would once more be an immensely powerful empire. This was the source of Yusang's long-term sturdiness. No matter what sort of wound it suffered, it could swiftly recover and threaten the central plains again and again. "Hurry! Focus on your training. There's no stopping until I give the order." Winds howled out from the north, and on the plain, a hardened Tibetan cavalry officer, his rough face seeming to have been cast from steel, was riding upon a tamed wild horse. The group of new recruits he was roaring at still had lingering signs that they were once shepherds. This Tibetan officer did not have any signs that indicated he belonged to Yusang, but his determined eyes and fierce aura of fire and blood were things that could have only been refined through bloody battles. In the militarist Confucian conflict, the other countries had all signed peace treaties with the Great Tang, and all of them had reduced their armies, with Yusang being no exception. But these soldiers had not put away their armor and returned to tend to their flocks. Instead, they had used this opportunity to scatter across the plateau, so that they could choose the best soldiers from the various tribes and then train them up into veteran soldiers in the hopes of forming a massive army. The Tibetan army would not shrink. In the future, it would only get larger. Flap, flap. The yak war banners of Yusang snapped in the wind, and with that veteran officer's orders, the countless Tibetan shepherds wearing basic armor gripped their sabers and spears, and formed and reformed into echelon formation. Clang, clang, clang. As the horses galloped back and forth, dim halos emerged from the feet of the shepherds. These halos began to connect to each other and resonate, and a faint barrier began to emerge in the air. The renowned fortress formation of Yusang had already reached its basic form. Everyone listen up. The Tang are an enemy that we can never share the same sky with. Just think about how many of our Yusang empire died at their hands. Just think about the plague and the deserted plains of the Ngari royal lineage that have still yet to recover. One day we will make them pay a price. Imagine those targets in front of you to be the Tang. For the Tsenpo, for all Tibetans. Underneath a 9-meter-tall banner loomed a Tibetan general. He had a brutal gaze and his voice resounded over the entire region. Roar! Kill, kill, kill! Thunderous roars came in response, and these cavalry in the midst of training waved around their weapons as they charged at the nearby targets. Boom! 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 One explosion after another could be heard as those round targets, as tall as adult men, were obliterated by sabers and spears, showering the surrounding area with debris. As the training continued, the entire base was enveloped in a somber aura. There were at least 6 of these bases in the Yusang Empire, and all of them were set up in sparsely inhabited areas. And there were also many spies and scouts placed along the route to the bases. If there were any strange activity or the base were exposed, these soldiers were to take off their armor and become ordinary shepherds, with the many sheep and cattle serving as proof. Ish! Suddenly, an arrow shot down the banner at the very center of the base. Swoosh! This sudden mishap had the Tibetan commander standing in a daze, a hint of shock in his eyes. This was clearly not something he had expected. All those Tibetan cavalry who had been vigorously training also instantly fell silent. What's going on here? A Tibetan horseman subconsciously turned his head, his mind a complete blank. But before he could react, an arrow plunged into his chest. The man stared in disbelief at the shaft of the arrow, and then dropped from his horse. Enemy! A split second after this horseman fell, a sharp cry in Tibetan resounded through the air. All the soldiers turned vigilant, but a moment later, they were confronted by a downpour of arrows. Under this dense rain, countless men were shot down from their horses. Rumble! A force of cavalry suddenly emerged from the distance, their hooves pounding like thunder. Most striking of all was the yellow war banner rising from the horizon. The word Tang as obvious as could be. The Tang. As this thought flashed through the minds of all the Tibetans, their hearts sank like stones. No one had expected the Tang army to make a long-distance raid and appear in a place like this. Half a day later, a messenger bird flew into Yusang's royal capital, reporting. Imperial Minister, the Yarlung royal lineage's training base and garrison in the eastern region of the plateau were both attacked. Both bases were almost completely wiped out. Judging by the traces left behind, it was probably the Tang. What? Dalen Trinling was studying a document when he heard the news and raised his head in shock. Let me see. The intelligence report was quickly handed over. Crack. After looking it over, Dalen Trinling clenched his fists as he crunched the report into a ball. Bastard! Dalen Trinling had a nasty scowl on his face. Dalen Trinling knew what was going on without needing to ask any further questions. He had not taken Wang Chong's earlier warning to heart, but to his surprise, Wang Chong had really carried it out. So, This is revenge for the operation in the capital? Dalen Trinling raised his head, a cold light in his eyes. Reporting. A few moments later, there was another flurry of footsteps. A royal capital guard came inside and immediately got down on his knees. Imperial Minister, we've received a letter from the Great Tang, from the King of Foreign Lands. The guard's report caused the mood in the entire palace to shift. Putting aside the developments in Yusang, more than 7,000 li away in the capital of the Great Tang, a golden guard strode into a hall. Your Highness, we have delivered the letter. Your Highness, will this operation against Dalen Trinling truly be effective? Su Kai asked, his expression apprehensive. Dalen Trinling is known as the wisest sage of the Tibetan Plateau, and our operation might incite his revenge. Dalen Trinling was no ordinary person. In the Yusang Empire, not even the much-admired Dalawan Ruozan had been able to compare to this man. And Wang Chong had always been cautious. Even when threatening Ishbara, he had only sent a letter and not actually attacked. But Wang Chong had an entirely different attitude toward Dalen Trinling. Not long after notifying him, he had begun the assault. This was completely different from the matter with Ishbara Kagan. Relax. Dalen Trinling won't take any action, Wang Chong firmly proclaimed, his eyes gleaming as he got to his feet. Wang Chong seemed to understand that distant imperial minister of Yusang far more than expected. Whether or not this incident had taken place, the Tibetans would think of every way to try and attack. As soon as the Great Tang showed weakness, Yusang would seize the moment. The Tibetans are still restraining themselves, as while they want to, they don't have the ability to. Wang Chong's eyes seemed to be able to see into the heart of the matter. Suddenly, Su Kai had a flash of insight. Wang Chong slowly said, the Tibetans' ambitions are far greater than ours. In the War of the Southwest, the Ngari royal lineage was basically turned into a wasteland. Only 3 of the 4 royal lineages remain. As for the eastern region, Geshu Han's constant attacks have prevented it from being able to rest and recover. In the north, I destroyed it when I began setting up the steel fortresses. The only one left is the Yarlung royal lineage. While it seems to have been safe all this time, in reality, it has gotten into no small number of conflicts with Greater and Lesser Balor, the kingdoms of the western regions, Gao Shenji's Anshi Protectorate Army, and the Arabs. Even before we got there, the Tibetans had fought several wars with the Arabs. If the Great Tang hadn't advanced into the western regions, Yusang and Arabia would have been mortal foes. The Yarlung royal lineage is in far worse condition than all of you can imagine. The only fighting force left is the protectors of the royal capital, the Lhasa royal lineage. He has far fewer soldiers available than you might think. Wang Chong had been studying the intelligence reports from Yusang this entire time, and understood far more than was publicly known. Dalen Trinling has only one opportunity, and if it results in defeat, Yusang will be unable to recover. I trust that he already knows about the rose root. With these words, Wang Chong revealed the object that was at the core of their tenuous relationship. The crux of his relationship with Dalen Trinling was not the force at the triangular gap, nor was it Wang Chong's grasp of strategy. It was none other than the flower that abounded on the plateau, roseroot. Dalen Trinling was one of the leading figures of this world, and not even Crown Prince's junior guardian Wang Zhongxi had been able to do anything to him. So how could anyone else? No one could have imagined that the object that had completely altered the relationship between the war saint and the imperial minister was a little red flower. The reason the Tibetans had always been so fearless in their raids of the east was the altitude sickness that all those of lower altitudes were afflicted by upon stepping onto the plateau, even the Arabs. But with Wang Chong's intervention, all of this had changed. Right now, even Geshu Han's Big Dipper army was regularly consuming roseroot, treating it as an ordinary part of their daily meals. The discovery of roseroot had caused this empire to lose the source of its pride. Now, if they were defeated, Wang Chong's armies would be able to penetrate into the plateau, take the royal capital and garrison it. This was why Dalen Trinling was so restrained toward Wang Chong. According to the news from Yusang, roseroot was now a scarce commodity on the marketplace. It seemed as if the Tibetans were even beginning to eradicate the small red flowers from the plateau. Alas, Roseroot was essentially a weed and was found throughout the plateau. The smallest amount of rain would cause them to bud and bloom once more. It was an arduous task to completely eliminate them. Moreover, Wang Chong and Geshuhan had already begun to cultivate roseroot en masse. Dalen Trinling is too cautious. As a wise minister, he plans first and moves second. The more aggressive we are, the less likely he will be to recklessly take action. I'm more worried about the incident in the capital. Wang Chong had been devoting almost all his time recently to using stellar energy to treat Old Eagle's injuries. With the power of his two supreme techniques and the medicines from the palace, Old Eagle's injuries had finally been stabilized. However, he was still unconscious and would probably need a long time to recover. Even so, this matter was far from over. What Wang Chong was concerned about was that the first prince had actually used Tibetans so that he left behind no trace of his involvement. This was completely unlike his normal style. Wang Chong was almost sure now that there was an extremely powerful expert at the first prince's side who was helping him strategize and plan. What Wang Chong needed to do right now was draw that person out of hiding. Is there any news? Wang Chong turned his sharp eyes to Chang Sanyuan. The Eastern Palace is as normal. Even now, we haven't been able to see any difference in its activities or identify anyone new. Chang Sanyuan shook his head. After all, the Eastern Palace wasn't within their ability to watch. On this aspect, they had to rely on the fifth prince and Li Jingzhong. Wang Chong fell silent. Chang Sanyuan's reply was not surprising. If his foe was really as he expected, he was an extremely shrewd and calculating expert that would make sure that no clues were left behind. But Wang Chong firmly believed that nothing could be done flawlessly. If his intuition was right, there were clues in the Eastern Palace. Tell Li Jingzhong that the fifth prince should keep out of this matter for now. In addition, have Li Jingzhong record everyone who goes in and out of the Eastern Palace every day. It doesn't need to be very detailed, and he doesn't need to get that close. As long as we look at how the Eastern Palace has changed from the past, we will be able to find some clues, Wang Chong sternly said. Once this was settled, Wang Chong deeply frowned. What sort of person is hiding behind the curtain and making all these plans? Wang Chong muttered to himself. Wang Chong had encountered his fair share of formidable foes, but this time was different. This mysterious figure had gotten ahead of him in the palace and wiped out any trace of eunuch Gao, and then they had used the Tibetans against him, choosing none other than Old Eagle as the target. Wang Chong felt a frightening sharpness from his foe's assaults. And Wang Chong sensed that this was merely the beginning, that this had been merely a minor display of ability. His enemy's true strategies were still to come. Wang Chong had a sudden thought and turned to the nearby Zhang Quebec, Zhang Ke. Now that you've gained control over the intelligence network, investigate the last carrier pigeon Old Eagle received. According to the spy team, this carrier pigeon was late by 5 minutes. I need to know what happened in those 5 minutes. Yes. The Eastern Palace was dark, the main hall lit by only a few oil lamps. In this hall were First Prince Li Ying, Zhu Tong-en, the white-haired elder known as Ghost King, seated on an armchair, and Eunuch Een hidden within the shadows. No one else was present. Senior, forgive me for being blunt. I can accept the use of Tibetans against Wang Chong, but in this assault, why didn't we choose any of his other subordinates, or perhaps those two generals, Li Sai and Su Hanshan, that he has at the Triangular Gap? Why did we choose this Old Eagle? I truly can't tell. What's so special about him? Now that no outsiders were present, the first prince got straight to the point. His brow was furrowed in confusion over the Ghost King's actions. He had used his connection with the Tibetans, but he had lost several Imperial Martial Realm experts to attack some lowly figure who played around with birds. Wasn't this using an ox knife to kill a chicken? The rations have to move before the army. Even that kid knows that. The person who makes many calculations before the battle will be victorious, while the one who makes few will lose. There are some things that you can't tell just by looking at the surface. The Ghost King faintly chuckled from his sandalwood armchair, his every movement exuding confidence and assurance. Anyone who looked at him couldn't help but be entranced. You still don't understand? In these previous clashes, you lost again and again because his eyes and ears are far sharper than yours. All of your movements are under his control. This was also how that boy from the Confucian sect lost. In a war of schemes, the first step was not to kill the enemy, but to cripple his eyes and ears, making him unable to accurately determine the situation. If one was not able to size up the situation and grasp all available information, even the wisest strategist was useless. This was a fundamental principle. Although that old eagle isn't very strong, his position at the side of the king of foreign lands is irreplaceable. As long as we can kill him, that kid will be running around blind, and it won't matter how smart he is. In the end, Zhu Tong'an overcame his hesitation to speak up. But we know that Old Eagle has a disciple called Xianxia. With Old Eagle heavily injured, his disciple has already taken full control, and everything seems to be operating normally. Moreover, they've recently been removing many of our spies. Senior's plan seems to not be very effective. The Eastern Palace became eerily still. Even First Prince Li Ying couldn't help but turn to the Ghost King. Although the First Prince remained silent, it was clear that he had the same thoughts. A disciple is just a disciple. If a disciple could so easily surpass their master, then they should have just switched places. Are you sure that Xianxia can really replace him? The Ghost King chuckled. Reporting. At that moment, one of the First Prince's personal guards rushed inside. Your Highness, the scout outside the King of Foreign Lands' residence reports that the King of Foreign Lands has begun to move. Many of our scouts and infiltrators have been eliminated. Of our 40-some infiltrators, only 3 are left, the personal guard reported, getting down on one knee as soon as he entered the hall. Everyone instantly grimaced at these words. This was not the first time the King of Foreign Lands had taken action against the Eastern Palace's men. They would occasionally allow the various parties to freely scout the area, even allowing them to jump over the wall of the King of Foreign Lands' residence. But in the space of a single breath and without any warning, they would unleash a thunderous strike that would wipe out all these spies. But this was not what was important. What was important was that in past operations, when the King of Foreign Lands took action, all the spies would be wiped out. This time, however, 3 spies had survived. One had to realize that for the purpose of intelligence gathering, as long as all spies were not eliminated, one was no different from 100. As long as a lookout was present, one could receive a constant stream of information. The Ghost King's judgment had been correct. That disciple, Xianxia, truly could not replace Old Eagle. A strange expression appeared on everyone's faces. The First Prince smiled as he stepped forward. Senior, this prince believes. No one should have any more doubts about your judgment. What should we do next? This old man has readied everything. The Ghost King's eyes flashed as if he had been waiting for these words from the First Prince. He suddenly rose from his armchair, and his body erupted with an immense pressure. Everyone watched as the Ghost King strode over to the model in the center of the hall. This was a model of the entire capital. Not only did it cover the entire imperial palace, but the residences of the nobles and common folk as well. Even Wang Chong's King of Foreign Lands residence was included. The model was simply enormous, a scaled-down version of the capital that was exquisitely detailed. The laws of the Great Tang decreed that it was forbidden for anyone to make a duplicate of the capital's layout, and those who defied this law faced heavy punishment. This was not without reason, as no one who decided to make a model of the capital ever had good intentions. If the news of this model got out, the First Prince would be impeached by the entire court. Buzz! The Ghost King reached his right hand out of its sleeve and flicked a finger. Immediately, 4 small flags flew through the air and landed on 4 separate residences in the model. As long as your Highness follows my plan and does these 4 things, everything will flow as smoothly as water through a canal. Your Highness will be able to fulfill your desires and sit upon the throne to become the overlord of the realm. The First Prince couldn't help but be moved by these words. Senior, what are these 4 things you refer to? Your Highness will understand when the time comes. The Ghost King gave an unfathomable smile. Xianxia's investigation quickly produced results. Wang Chong's judgment had been correct. There was a reason those Tibetans had been able to find Old Eagle's location so quickly. According to Xianxia's investigation, The spy team member who had been delivering information to Old Eagle had abruptly disappeared in the aftermath. Not only that, when the carrier pigeon that Old Eagle had received right before the incident had been inspected, claw marks of a bird of prey had been found on its body, indicating that it had been captured. It was now apparent that the carrier pigeon Old Eagle used to send information had been watched, and someone had used a gerfalcon or a similar type of bird to capture it. This was why the carrier pigeon had been 5 minutes late, and the enemy had used the carrier pigeon to find Old Eagle's location. While all this seemed simple, it was easier said than done. The birds used by Old Eagle, even the carrier pigeons, had all undergone rigorous training that included aerial combat and escaping capture. Old Eagle had long ago developed a unique training system that even involved feeding his birds a special kind of food that was mixed with herbs that would strengthen the bones and muscles of his birds. This would allow them to fly long distances and escape any sudden ambushes. Old Eagle's birds were not something that an ordinary bird of prey had the strength to catch. And it wasn't like all the birds would personally go to Old Eagle. It was only for certain special incidents that Old Eagle would receive them personally. Rigorous analysis and screening were needed to find the right bird, and it wasn't something that those Tibetans could have done. While Wang Chong had some lingering doubts before, he was growing more and more certain as he obtained more and more intelligence that pointed to that man in the inner palace. After looking through the report, Wang Chong handed it to Xianxia and coldly ordered, "That man in the imperial palace has too high of a status to do such a thing. Investigate anyone who has bought birds in the capital recently, particularly birds of prey like gerfalcons. There can't be many people like this. Find the man behind all this." Xianxia affirmed and left. Half a day later, Xianxia found the news Wang Chong desired. Around half a month ago, a Gogrian merchant who could train gerfalcons appeared in the capital. He began to sell various birds of prey, and a few days after that, the imperial army appeared at his store, but the man had already vanished. According to the information we gathered, that Gogrian merchant was called Kim Yusuk. It's him. Wang Chong's brow creased upon hearing the news. He had heard the name Kim Yusuk before. There had been a Gogrian on the execution list after the Imperial Palace incident concluded. For there to be a Gogrian in the middle of this incident was far too bizarre, and it had drawn much curiosity at the time. Wang Chong only knew that this man's name was Kim Yusuk. Wang Chong had never expected him to appear here. As the investigation continued, even more information was revealed. That Gogrian merchant called Kim Yusuk was extremely famous in the Goguryeo Empire, known as the Supreme Eagle King of Goguryeo. The gerfalcons he raised were extraordinarily vicious, and according to the information from the spies in Goguryeo, Kim Yusuk was an extremely ambitious man. He had been an extremely prosperous merchant in Goguryeo and had even sold his gerfalcons to the imperial household. But later on, those talks with the Goguryeo imperial household apparently fell through, seemingly because he felt that the price offered was too low. Based on what Kim Yusuk had said before, he seemed to think that the Goguryeo Empire was too poor. As the Central Plains was far wealthier, he turned his attention to the capital of the Great Tang. He was now on the wanted list of Goguryeo. So it was him. Old Eagle had no idea who he was facing, so it was no wonder he was caught. Wang Chong pensively raised his head. Wang Chong was sure that the matter of Kim Yusuk was no simple affair. It was obvious that the first prince was beginning to recruit men. Kim Yusuk was a Gogrian, but the first prince didn't care. It was clear that the incident from his memories was getting closer and closer. The rebellion of the three princes. As the memories of that incident re-emerged, a hint of sorrow appeared in Wang Chong's eyes. Kim Yusuk had already entered the Eastern Palace, and he probably wouldn't show his face again for some time, at least not after that attack. But Wang Chong was in no rush. No matter where Kim Yusuk was, his fate was sealed. When the time came, Wang Chong would make him pay the price, and that day was not too far off in the future. His first priority was still to treat Old Eagle's injuries. Pass on my order. Distribute posters with Kim Yusuk's face. If he is discovered, kill on sight, Wang Chong sternly said. This news traveled all over the capital and was even sent to the distant Goguryeo. Time slowly passed. The attack on Old Eagle had made all of Wang Chong's subordinates wary. Moreover, following Wang Chong's order, a password system had been implemented in the intelligence network. Even if the carrier pigeons were captured or the communication method used by Wang Chong's spies were revealed through torture, the spies could use a secretive method to inform the others that they were in trouble. Old Eagle's injuries were stabilized and slowly began to improve, marking a temporary end to the incident. No one knew Wang Chong's plan, but after the incident, a map of the capital had appeared in the King of Foreign Lands' residence. While no one knew what Wang Chong was doing, he spent many hours each day pondering the map, occasionally drawing incomprehensible signs upon it. After the incident, the first prince seemed to settle down, and the capital calmed down. 10 days later, after administering his usual treatment to Old Eagle, Wang Chong had returned to the main hall to ponder the map. Whoosh! There was a sudden flapping of wings. Wang Chong looked up and saw a mottled bird at the window. Wang Chong glanced at it and immediately raised an eyebrow. This bird was not one of those fierce birds of prey, nor was it the usual carrier pigeon. Rather, it was a beautiful lark. Many people in the capital raised birds, but none of them used larks to deliver messages. It's her. Wang Chong gently smiled. This lark was extremely familiar to him. It was the one he had gifted to the young lady of the Bai clan, Bai Siling. Wang Chong had the lark land on his palm and quickly took the letter it carried. The familiar and elegant words written upon the letter elicited a warm smile from Wang Chong. Now that he thought about it, he hadn't gotten in touch with Bai Siling in a very long time. It's rare for this girl to think of me. What sort of problem could she have encountered? With this thought in mind, Wang Chong glanced through the letter, and a moment later, his brow creased and his face grimaced. Bai Siling had started with a few pleasantries, and then she had gotten to the main topic. Apparently, First Prince Liang had recently begun constructing a large Buddhist temple outside the capital. This engineering project had mobilized more than 1,000 craftsmen, and Phoebe Jinan wood and other various precious kinds of wood were being shipped in from across the empire. The project was also proceeding very quickly, and it was predicted that it would only need 6 more days to be completed. When the time came, the first prince planned to personally write the name of the Buddhist temple for its signboard and preside over the opening ceremony, and he had invited the Bai clan to come. The Bai clan was still undecided, but if they did decide to go, they would send Bai Siling as their representative. Given how sensitive the current political climate was, Bai Siling had asked for Wang Chong's views on the matter. Bai Siling sought Wang Chong's advice on whether the Bai clan would attend or not. When constructing either a Buddhist temple or Taoist temple, it was custom to invite a few great clans and wealthy local officials to attend the ceremony. While it was called attending the ceremony, in reality it was a request to donate incense, oil, and money. Constructing a temple was an enormous expense, and the majority of the ceremony attendees were extremely wealthy. When the time came to donate incense, oil, and money, they would donate significant amounts, enough to cover a portion of the expense. Although Bai Siling had written this letter, it was actually the Bai clan asking for Wang Chong's opinion. After all, Wang Chong had an unfriendly relationship with the first prince, and many people knew just how enraged the first prince had become after the Public Order Squad incident. But this was not what Wang Chong was concerned about. It's coming so quickly? As he slowly looked up from the letter, Wang Chong's brows began to furrow. The great Buddhist temple. How could Wang Chong possibly forget about that incident? When the first prince invited almost every great clan in the capital to attend the ceremony, no one had thought much of it. They had all believed that this would be like the Buddhist temple ceremonies of the past, except that it was the first prince constructing this temple, so they would probably have to donate more incense, oil, and money. But this matter was far more complicated than they would imagine. How could someone of the first prince's status build a Buddhist temple for no reason? He was even personally writing its signboard and holding the ceremony. It had to be known that the first prince wasn't a Buddhist. For the first prince, the ceremony was merely an excuse. The construction of the Buddhist temple was to build up goodwill in the public and also find out just how many great clans in the capital actually supported him. When the ceremony concluded, all those great clans who had received the first prince's invitation but had not attended the ceremony were put on the first prince's blacklist. In the aftermath, the first prince would make them the focus of his vengeance and suppression. Through various excuses, the first prince borrowed the power of the imperial court, and many great clans that had gone on for centuries were shattered and broken. In the Great Tang, these great clans weren't merely wealthy families. They were powerful factions in their own right, and in their centuries of operations, they had become one with the Great Tang. For the sake of a factional dispute, the first prince destroyed these clans who would not submit, and in doing so, he destroyed the strength of the Great Tang. This foreshadowed the coming disaster. If one thought back, if there was one incident that proclaimed that the Great Tang had entered internal strife, it was the Great Buddhist Temple incident. Not even Wang Chong had imagined that this incident would come so quickly, and his expression instantly turned grave. The Great Buddhist Temple incident seemed simple, but it would cause many people to lose their heads. No matter what, he had to stop it. As if in response to Wang Chong's thoughts, the Stone of Destiny loudly proclaimed, "Special event. Rebellion of the Three Princes begins. User has 3 months to stop this event. Starting from now, the loss of each great clan in the capital will result in a deduction of 10,000 destiny energy points. If user is able to alter this disaster, then once the rebellion of the Three Princes is over, user will be rewarded with 20,000 points of destiny energy for each great clan saved. The above amounts are not restricted." Wang Chong's vision was covered in crimson light, and then a massive symbol appeared that began to shrink into a small mark that branded itself onto the Stone of Destiny. As Wang Chong sensed this change in his mind, he fell into a contemplative mood. Reporting. A few moments later, a golden guard rushed inside. "Your Highness, the Zhang, Li, Huang, and Lu clans have all sent messages saying they have something to report. Your Highness, please review them." The guard respectfully offered the letters in his hand. Wang Chong said nothing, frowning as he took the letters and looked them over. Just as expected, the Zhangs, Lis, Huangs, and Lus had all received invitations from the first prince. These great clans were all very close to Wang Chong, and everyone knew that many of those steel modules that had played great roles in the construction of the City of Steel and the Battle of Talas had been forged by these clans. The first prince couldn't possibly have been unaware, but he nonetheless sent them invitations. This was clearly intentional, but it was hard to divine his intentions. Wang Chong sensed that if he didn't handle this matter properly, the effects would be far worse than he imagined. "Come, pass on my order. Ask all the great clans that we're working with whether they've received an invitation from the first prince," Wang Chong suddenly said, his expression incredibly serious. A few hours later, Wang Chong determined that the number was far greater than imagined. A single Buddhist temple was forcing all of the great clans of the capital to make a choice: follow the first prince or become his enemy. At the same time, all of the first prince's faction members had gathered in the Eastern Palace. "Have all the invitations been sent?" the Ghost King suddenly asked, his gaze turning to one of the first prince's advisors. "They've all been sent. Any clan with property exceeding 10,000 strings of cash has received an invitation. But although the invitations were sent, the Great Buddhist Temple is not yet complete, so we can't know how many will attend yet." "This is enough," the Ghost King indifferently said. "What comes next is not anything you need to worry about." The Ghost King lowered his head and continued to read the book in his hand. He exuded a reassuring aura, like everything was under his control. Upon seeing this attitude from the Ghost King, everyone fell silent. Although he was the most recent addition to the first prince's retinue, he had already become their leader, attaining a status that none of them could reach. "Senior, this prince has a question." At this moment, the first prince suddenly spoke. While he had let the Ghost King handle everything, this did not mean that he couldn't ask questions, couldn't intervene. "In building this Buddhist temple, can we really achieve the effect you speak of? Moreover, while there's nothing wrong with the other clans, this prince also sees that you've invited the Zhangs, Lis, Huangs, Lus, and other clans closely tied to the king of foreign lands. Given their relationship with him, will they sincerely support this prince?" A single Buddhist temple, no matter how resplendent it was, even if the Buddha idol was gilded, cost the equivalent of pocket change to the first prince. But the Ghost King had said that this Buddhist temple could let him recruit almost all the great clans of the capital to his side, a fact which the first prince found difficult to believe. Or perhaps one could call it delusional. One had to realize that they weren't facing an ordinary foe. If it were that easy to defeat him, they would have never ended up in such a sorry state. Hey, your highness is already the regent, yet you still have such immature ideas? What does it matter whether it's sincere? Everything in the realm is the territory of the sovereign, and all of its people his subjects. Do you really think they would dare to defy your highness? And your highness overestimates their relationship to the king of foreign lands. In the end, their relationship is a commercial one. Is your highness going to tell me that their relationship with the king of foreign lands is so good that they would be willing to put the lives of their entire clan at risk? The Ghost King indifferently said, not raising his head from the tiny characters in his book. It was like the first prince's question was so absurd that he could hardly be bothered to answer. On one side is the king of foreign lands, but on the other side is the successor to the throne. Your highness, if you were in their position, how would you choose? The Ghost King's last words plunged the Eastern Palace into silence, and everyone's eyes glowed. It was true. All of them had been worried about far too much, and Wang Chang's edge had been far too sharp. They had momentarily forgotten that most essential fact. Just how many people in the world were willing to throw away their lives so that one man could oppose the future sage emperor? Your highness, just sit back and prepare to receive the good news, the Ghost King commented without raising his head. A smile slowly formed on the first prince's lips. Kim Yusuk, did you hear what the Ghost King said before? Starting from now, I need you to keep a close watch on the king of foreign lands and all the great clans of the capital. Inform me immediately on any new developments. The first prince suddenly turned to a nearby bowed figure. The man had 2 sabers sheathed on his back and a fierce gerfalcon on his shoulder. He had a rather sinister face, and his bearing was not that of a person from the Central Plains. From his facial features, he was clearly a Gogrian. Your highness, be at ease. As long as I am here, the slightest activity in the king of foreign lands' residence or in the capital will be reported immediately. If there is an error, your highness may punish me as you please. Kim Yusuk spoke with a heavy Gogrian accent, and his entire body exuded confidence. It was as if there was nothing in the world that he couldn't accomplish. Good. Be at ease. As long as you loyally serve this prince will fulfill his promises to you. Not only will you receive immense riches, you will possess authority that you never could have imagined in Goguryeo, the first prince said. Many thanks, your highness. Kim Yusuk immediately got to his knees and prostrated. Into the night, the homes of the Zhang, Li, Huang, and Lu clans were still brightly lit. Within the conference hall of the Lu clan patriarch had a vexed expression as he anxiously paced back and forth. All the elders and retainers of the Lu clan were around him. Their brows were furrowed and their faces worried. The reason for all this was an ordinary invitation card on the table, no larger than a palm. How is it? Any news from the king of foreign lands? The Lu clan patriarch turned to the key member of the Lu clan responsible for communications. Still none. Maybe I should just go to the king of foreign lands' residence myself. The core member of the Lu clan replied. The Lu clan residence was actually very close to the king of foreign lands' residence. He had made this request before, but the Lu clan patriarch had required him to send a letter. No! Despite his worries, the Lu clan patriarch firmly denied the request. The king of foreign lands is surrounded by scouts and spies, even from foreign countries. The number of spies and assassins cleared out every day from the surroundings of the king of foreign lands' residence is immense, and none of these people care about their lives. If we go there now, we will cause a major problem. The Lu clan is not a martial clan, and we have no way of dealing with such a complicated situation. The recently completed king of foreign lands' residence had already become the center of the storm engulfing the entire realm. A battle at the city gates would also catch the fish in the moat. If they went to the king of foreign lands' residence at this time, they would inevitably cause misunderstandings and bring about unnecessary problems. Wang Chong had also considered this point and had requested all of them to only send carrier pigeons unless the matter was of utmost importance. Reporting. At this moment of unease, there was a flurry of footsteps, and a few moments later, a guard of the Lu clan came in. Patriarch, we have just received a letter from the King of Foreign Lands. Please take a look. These words caused the entire conference hall to fall silent, everyone looking at the guard. Bring it over. The Lu clan patriarch hastily snatched the letter and opened it up, but after glancing at it, his face froze in shock. Patriarch, what did the King of Foreign Lands say? The elders and core members of the clan expectantly looked at the patriarch, but after not receiving a reply for some time, they began to grow surprised. Take a look for yourselves. The Lu clan patriarch simply handed the letter over. The letter made the rounds through the hall, and once everyone had gotten a look, their expressions were just as strange as the patriarch's. This? All of them glanced at each other, unable to speak. After a long silence, the Lu clan patriarch finally said, I also don't know what the King of Foreign Lands is thinking, but since he has spoken, we'll just do as he says. Similar scenes took place across the capital. Half a month went by in the blink of an eye, and it was soon the opening day for the great Buddhist temple. The great Buddhist temple was seated on a mountain outside the capital. Even though the appointed time had not arrived, there was already a vast sea of people gathered at the base of the mountain. The matter of the first prince paying for the construction of a Buddhist temple had been the talk of the capital, and countless common folk had come to view the event. Unlike the imperial court, many ordinary folk in the capital were not very sensitive to political matters. They had come purely to see the first prince and the massive 10-meter-tall Buddha idol in front of the temple. Your Highness, the Huang clan has sent a letter. Please look it over. On another mountain not far from the great Buddhist temple, a golden-armored Eastern Palace guard kneeled on the ground. Good. On the summit, the first prince's eyes shone in delight. Hand it over. The first prince was even more delighted once he read the contents of the letter. Zhu Tongyan, how many of the great clans have agreed to attend the ceremony? The first prince folded up the letter and turned in the direction of the wind, a fresh and relaxed feeling in his heart. Zhu Tongyan stood 7 feet behind the first prince as he bowed and reported, Your Highness, at present, we have received more than 5,000 replies, and at least 80% of the great clans have agreed to attend the ceremony. And this number is increasing, and we expect that even more will come. Haha. Okay. The first prince rejoiced at this news. Senior Ghost King's plan was truly flawless. To think that a mere Buddhist temple would be able to draw in almost all the renowned clans of the capital. This prince wasted so much time racking his mind and taking such great pains to try and recruit all these factions. As he looked across to that dazzling and vast great Buddhist temple on the other side, as well as the vast crowd gathered in front of it, the first prince finally and completely acknowledged the Ghost King. His greatest worry had been his inability to obtain the support of the people. Without this foundation, he had always felt that his efforts to sit upon the throne had been missing something. But now things were different. As long as these great clans supported him, his position would be right and proper, as steady as Mount Tai. The sun had just risen, and there was still a very long time until the time listed in the invitation cards would arrive. The first prince's sense was right. As time passed, more and more commoners gathered at the base of the mountain, and the first prince received more and more letters. Each reply made the expression on the first prince's face even more dazzling. A wise man knows when to submit to fate. What does the opposition of the King of Foreign Lands matter? In the end, the great clans of the capital have chosen to stand with this prince. With the support of these clans, what can't this prince achieve? A gentle breeze swept across, and the first prince felt refreshed. Once the day was over, who in the capital would dare to be his enemy? Pass on this prince's order. Inform all the representatives of the great clans and prepare for the opening ceremony. The first prince suddenly said, Yes, Your Highness. A guard rushed away. The anticipated moment had finally come. Bong! With the resounding ring of a bell, the great Buddhist temple that the first prince had financially backed was finally opening. As Buddhist chants filled the air, the countless commoners began to surge up the mountain. Amitabha! On the summit, nearly 100 monks wearing golden kasayas stood in a row, a magnificent sight to behold. For this opening ceremony, the first prince had invited the head monks from various temples to join in the festivities. Soon, the ceremony reached its most important phase. Gracious benefactors, thank you for coming to the opening ceremony for this temple. The merciful Buddha holds compassion for all living beings. The Buddhist texts say that to make offerings to the Buddha is to make offerings to all living things, and to sustain the Buddha is to sustain all life, a most meritorious deed. Thus, with the opening of this Buddhist temple, we request the support and offerings of the gracious benefactors. But as all beings are equal in the eyes of the Buddha, all offerings, no matter how big or small, are the same. Everyone can offer as much or as little as they are comfortable with. The genial abbot of the great Buddhist temple was an eminent monk who the first prince had invited. This temple was only constructed with the assistance of the first prince. His Highness has an esteemed and imperial status, but he holds a merciful and compassionate heart, truly a blessing for all peoples. Now, we invite the first prince to say a few words. The abbot stepped back and glanced at the nearby Liang. The abbot had barely spoken when the mountain exploded with cheers. First prince! First prince! First prince! The cheers resounded through the world. As he saw the crowds cheer, the first prince's heart swelled with joy. He felt as though he wasn't standing at the peak of a mountain, but within the majestic Taiji Palace, receiving the respect and support of all his subjects. Everyone, as the abbot said, making offerings to the Buddha is the same as making offerings to all living beings. This prince supported the construction of this temple for the sake of my great Tang, for the prosperity of all the people of the realm. This prince will take the lead and donate 100,000 strings of cash for the Buddhist temple to use. In addition, all the incense, oil, and money received in this ceremony will be used for charitable purposes, so that the great Buddhist temple can serve as a place of shelter for the orphans and widows of the area, the first prince loudly proclaimed. Boom! All the common folk of the capital cheered. The first prince is truly a benevolent and kind person. So the first prince built this temple for the sake of the orphans and widows. A kind and benevolent prince is bound to be a kind and benevolent sovereign. That abbot was right. If the first prince becomes the sovereign of the great Tang, it will be a blessing to the people of the realm. All the commoners became excited at the first prince's words. Many of the spectators to this ceremony had come due to the first prince's fame, and they had not expected to hear such words. The cheering grew louder and louder, and as the first prince took in their ardent cries and felt their sincere support, he grew even more energetic and joyful. A single Buddhist temple had gotten him the support of the great clans and won the hearts of the people. There was no better deal in the entire world. Bang! With the banging of gongs, the ceremony began, and the representatives of the great clans began to come forward. The Li clan of the capital donates 8,000 taels of gold to celebrate the opening of the great Buddhist temple. The Duan clan of the capital donates 6,000 taels of gold to celebrate the opening of the great Buddhist temple. The Zhang clan of the capital donates 3,000 taels of gold to celebrate the opening of the great Buddhist temple.